Well, no one can ever forget where they were on September 11th. And I had just passed the Pentagon, arrived on the Capitol complex, had walked over to the Department of Agriculture's hearing at the Ag Committee, which I served on. And then all of a sudden, people were starting to become evacuated. And it was word of mouth. At that time, we had no emergency disaster system within the House of Representatives. Our lives were all dictated by a beeper we carried on our belt. Unfortunately, the guy on the other end of the beeper that would have talked to us was evacuated, so we lost communication entirely. And so 10 years ago today, I was in fact evacuated onto the street, and we knew at that time life as we knew it in America probably was changed forever. The older you get, the more you remember when you didn't have a computer, you didn't have a BlackBerry. At that time, of course, we had cell phones, but the cell service at that time then became pretty spotty because of the emergency, and the lines were full, and so you worry about how your family is. My family did come to Washington with me in the beginning. It didn't work. They wanted to be on the ranch where we had the horses and the Western lifestyle, so eventually they did move back, but they were here on September 11th. And I really worried about it, and they were worried as well. You could see that there were a lot of tears on their side, where's Dad and how things going. And once we established that everybody was safe, then you start worrying and talking to other families, making sure that they're safe and who was at the Pentagon. And a lot of things go through your mind at a disaster like that. But ultimately, it was refreshing to know that the community came together, whether it was Washington, D.C., Virginia, Maryland, those in Pennsylvania and New York City. And so we must remember September 11th. Our life did change, and as a nation, in many ways, we're stronger for it. Well, everybody was out on the street, and they were trying to make a determination where we should all muster. And Darrell Issa came driving up in his truck, and Butch and I looked at each other. Butch Otter is now the governor of Idaho, a couple of cowboys, and we said, well, it's good enough for us at home. It's good enough for us in Washington. We jumped in the back of the pickup, and off we headed. And we went over to the police station where they had constant updates for the congressman and the senator all day long, telling us what was going on in Pennsylvania and New York City and out at the Pentagon. The next day, we immediately went out to the Pentagon to see the damage, to talk to some of the rescue personnel, to talk to the ministers, pastors, rabbis that were all lined up there to help the first responders. And it was a pretty gruesome sight, but more importantly, it really did bring America together. It's one of those feelings you'll never forget. We did, in fact, if you remember, went out on the Capitol steps, a number of us, and spontaneously started singing God Bless America. And at that time, you knew you were one nation under God. Everybody came together, Republican and Democrat alike, from all walks of life. And we sang God Bless America, and it meant a lot, not only to us, but I hope to America as well. You never know what's going to bring a nation together. And if nothing else, this economic crisis we find ourselves in now should help bring people together, arm in arm, hand across the table, rolling up our sleeves, whatever you want to call it. This is one of those situations where people are hurting out there, and we can't lose sight of it. We have a tendency to think of statistics and unemployment rates, but when you talk about an unemployment rate, you're really talking about somebody out of a job, somebody who's struggling to figure out where their next paycheck's going to come from, if there is one, how do they pay for their child's shoes, their books, whether they're going to have a college education or not, whether it's a senior citizen worrying about their investments, will they have enough money to live on their fixed income? And so this is really a time when set aside the partisan politics, set aside the statistics, and think about the human aspect, the element of people helping people in America. And that shouldn't be a red state, blue state, a Republican, Democrat, an urban versus rural. It's just Americans helping Americans.